Can you believe it?
Oh my gosh, I can't even. I feel like I'm floating around over here right now.
No, I'm telling you, when I recovered, it was like years that I was floating. Like years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's why I'm like, I hope this never goes away.
It's like, why would anybody want to do cocaine when they got this? And this is real. Like, who would?
Exactly.
This is why people take drugs. This must be what they're experiencing. But I'm not taking anything.
Too, so I know.
Right. But this is real. It's coming from my own love for me.
Yeah. Yep. Oh my gosh. I can't even. I've had a really great weekend being able to like actually see outside of myself and enjoy where I'm at and where I've been, and I can't even. I've never felt like this before.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah.
It's like, this is what it's supposed to be like.
Yeah.
What it's supposed to be like. When I texted you, you sent me this shot of a list of what the symptoms were for survival mode. Right? You know how many times I've said, oh, you're in fight or flight, you're in survival mode, these are symptoms. So many people are like, oh yeah, I'm just a perfectionist. I'm like, oh no, you're not. No, you're not. That's a symptom. And everybody's a perfectionist when they're in that state of mind. Everybody is. It's a beautiful thing. But don't identify by that. Anyways, but yeah. So what made you go and look that up?
I've just been kind of studying this morning. I Bible study in the mornings, and everything that we're going through together with this is all kind of coming along with my study.
You're talking about the First Testament or the Second?
Yeah, the whole Bible, the First and New Testament. Yeah,
the New Testament's what I'm talking about. This is mostly New Testament. Not the Old Testament. The Old Testament's history and war and blah blah blah. I studied for about 4 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, at the time I didn't appreciate any of it, but the New Testament, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now it's making sense. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
This is what we mean by grace.
Yeah, exactly.
And what faith is. Like, I knew what faith was, but I didn't know what faith was until I jumped off that cliff. And the other thing is it's not dependent on this idea of God or Jesus. This is not dependent. This is dependent within your own sense of grace for yourself.
Yeah.
That makes it so much, I know it did for me, far more. That was the opening, was when I did it for myself.
Right. Yep.
It was not, I'm reliant on meeting standards so that Jesus will do it for me,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, I get that too, but that's not. No.
That's not how it works. But anyways, so amazing, right?
Yes.
So what do you have? Yes. What would you say to someone listening to this who's like, what? How do they do that? How did she get this? How does she have so much freedom? She must, they might be thinking, well, it's because she's not, they might be thinking she's not that overweight. That's why it's so easy for her.
Oh my gosh, no. I'm 330 some odd pounds and my knees hurt and my back hurt. Mm-hmm. But I quit trying to diet.
Well, that was the first part.
I quit buying into the body image.
That's where we went, right?
Yeah.
So underneath all the dieting, you have to get rid of the body image stuff to really quit dieting.
Yeah.
We can go both routes, quit dieting and then deal with the image issues, or we go into the image issues and dieting just naturally quits itself.
Yeah. Right. Wow. Yeah.
There's a variety of ways to get in there, and it's not so easy for someone who has the physical hardship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because the first 3 sessions, I was just still stuck in, what are people going to think about me? And, they're still looking at me like I'm fat.
And what about my health?
Yes. Yeah. What about my health?
Okay, so this is really common for the clients I work with who have binge eating or who are morbidly obese. I have clients who've never reached where you're at right now.
Oh my gosh.
It's sad because it's right there. It's right there. And they just can't accept it. They cannot accept their weight. And you understand. You can understand why.
Yeah.
It is scary.
Yeah, it totally goes against everything in our culture.
And completely. Within your own thoughts, within your own feelings. Like, even if the culture says you suck, you feel I sucked. So screw the culture. I feel sucky. Physically, emotionally, psychologically. So the hardest thing for me, like, I feel like where I'm weak in instruction, or where I just, maybe it has nothing to do with me being weak with the instruction, but the fact that some people just cannot accept their weight. That the instruction is the same. Whether you're 400 pounds, whether you're 350 pounds, whether you're 121 pounds and need to get down to 117 pounds. I mean, the same thing occurs for them. You have to accept what it is as it is with no conditions, which means you're 330 some pounds. And that means that if you were to surrender all of this, the body is now on its own, and you have to be okay with whatever that is. And it could be bigger, it could be smaller, and it could be constantly anything in between and all over the place. So you have to just accept whatever that is. And the consequences of other people's thoughts around it at all times, permanently, forever. Right? That's what you and I finished with last time, which was go through the process of accepting people's criticism. They all think you suck. Did you listen to that session again?
I did. I think twice. Yeah.
What do you feel that was important for you? That step,
absolutely.
To visualize yourself going through the coming out of the closet.
Yeah, it was like kind of like an exposure therapy.
Yeah.
So that it kind of weakened the sting, I guess, is how.
Yeah, you know what it did for me is it made me aware of what I was really hesitating for. I didn't know until in my mind. It was really kind of amazing that what really kind of kept me in that trap was embarrassment.
Yeah.
I will be embarrassed. So when I recognized that I'm afraid of the fear of embarrassment. Remember when I said it's not the physical fear you're afraid of. I mean, physical fear is really just a physicality. I mean, running on a treadmill for an hour with your heart rate at 190 beats per minute is way, way more difficult than sitting in fear.
Right.
Right? Wow. Like the amount of torture I've done is beyond just physical fear. But it was the fear of fear that was kind of the trap of me trying to escape, right? Not facing it. So when I faced it, it's almost like it became conscious. It became a conscious thing for me to go, oh, I'm afraid to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
I don't want people to make fun of me. It's like the embarrassment of it all. And in the moment, for me, I remember thinking, but in my head, I compared embarrassment, and I went through that feeling of exposure, and I compared it to what I was doing in fear and afraid and hiding from those emotions. And it was like, I would rather be embarrassed. The other thing that was so transformational for me was not just I'd rather be embarrassed, but when we talked about, but it's relative to whatever they think. Even if I am shamed or people think I'm a terrible human, I'm the only one that knows why I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know the torture I was in. They don't know that I was running on a treadmill for an hour with my heart rate at 190 beats per minute trying to get to over 1,000 calories. They don't know that.
Yeah.
So I don't even have to explain that to them. Because then I'm still tortured trying to explain myself to people who are critical assholes. Anyway, so going through that process, too, of not excusing anything. To fully go through rejection. They will reject me. I don't know. That was a really important part of it. That I'm not embarrassed. And I'm not willing to do this anymore to try to avoid embarrassment.
Right. Yep.
And if I'm willing to just accept being inferior, that ultimately gives me total freedom to then be real. Just real. I don't have to be something I'm not. I don't have to have a different identity other than what's true. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I feel right now.
So what I believe this is, so this is why I've studied survival mode, and I looked into, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Have we talked about that?
I've heard it in your videos before, so I have looked it up.
Okay, so he believes that and there's a lot of science around evolutionary psychology, how we as a species has evolved and become pack animals, and why we're so sensitive psychologically to certain things and not other things. And they look at it as from the viewpoint of, well, what if this is evolution, living off the land, and living in tribes of 20, 30 people. And we look at history and what we do know about, as much as we know, that they believe that, well, Maslow suggested that our brain has a hierarchy of prioritization around what we are consciously to focus on. And so he believes that we are wired to, our focus and our conscious focus is wired to fixate on food until it is secure. And until then, that's your number one priority. And it really takes everything else and says this is less important. So you become obsessed around getting food, finding food, foraging for it, keeping it, and preserving it, right? It becomes something we're highly obsessed around naturally under like third world environments. That would be the most important thing that you would think about every day, all day long for your children and yourself, right? Yeah. Cleanliness of water, access to food. The next priority up would be your environmental safety. Okay, so do I have shelter from the elements? If my child gets cut or bit, or do I have the medical supplies? So getting access to medical help. Those are also things that we are wired to be concerned about out of just the awareness that we know we could get hurt and it's preventable, right? Or we can fix it. So that's environmental safety, like clothing and how we choose, why we look at the weather every day. Those are things that are evolutionary to our psychology to want to know how to dress appropriately so that don't freeze to death or dehydrate to death, right? So it's food. It's like physiological needs first, which you could say air, water, food. So primarily, what do you focus on in general? Wouldn't you agree? The food?
Yeah.
Because we don't have water issues. So if you look at the United States in general, obviously we don't have water obsession.
Right.
But if you go to Africa, they do. You know what I mean? So going up the priority, the third hierarchy of need really embodies our pack animal needs. So what the evolutionary psychologists believe that, obviously we can survive without other human beings. It's not physiologically necessary to be with another person. And, they looked at sex. Originally, sex was one of the primaries, and now it's not, because you don't have to have sex. And there's many people who choose to never have sex. And they're fine, Anyways, so we look at that third hierarchy of need, and if we keep it really simple, it's our desire to be wanted into a group, and to feel accepted into a group, and to feel safe in a group, in our tribe. And so if you look at survival mode, wouldn't you agree, like, if you don't have what you need to survive, you're going to be in survival mode?
Wow, yeah. So then you just kind of stay.
Yeah, well, the problem is we clearly... Okay, so let's look at your personal survival experience. Which hierarchy do you think has been threatened?
The food.
Mm-hmm. And why? Yeah. What's attacking your food?
The need to restrict it.
Yes, and
so that I can fit into
your desire to be loved.
Yeah.
And so when you look at Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, it's usually in a pyramid. So I only included the bottom three because the next two up are more higher levels of consciousness. They're not survival mode actualities. They're people who are surviving. They have the luxury of, and he talked about they talk about the difference of how people are in survival mode, and then when people come out of survival mode, that they are more gracious, more lenient, more laid back. They're more explorative because they don't have to be perfect. So they're willing to do things riskier without it being all or nothing. They'll do, if you look at like human evolution around tools. Well, when they had food and when they had shelter and when they had seeds, they could explore with farming equipment because they had what they needed. So they could actually dismantle things and remake them and make them better, because they had the freedom to do that. If they weren't surviving well, if they didn't have adequate food, oftentimes, why would you take the risk of, dismantling a piece of equipment that you need to get food, right? Do you see how that would change your riskiness? Yeah. So how we work as humans, how our brains function, how our personalities are, changes dramatically when you come out of survival mode. Right. And so he talks about Maslow, so it was food, water, air, excretion, environmental safety, fire, shelter, blankets, clothing, healthcare. The third was pack animal needs, love, bonding, belonging. So those are the primary three. And then it goes into self-esteem and self-actualization. So it's very much more around like feeling secure with who you are and developing your own curiosity as a human being and exploration.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm looking at it right now too.
Yeah. So in my mind, I see it differently because I've really added to it in my own way of teaching myself, Dr. David R. Hawkins' scale of consciousness. So if you Google Dr. David R. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, he has really a dividing line between what he calls the negative levels of consciousness versus the positive levels of consciousness. And he's graded them from 0 to 1,000. So anything below 200 is really a negative. It's the victim positionality, and it goes from like, so he really describes, survival or ego. Narcissism is below that 200 level. It's survival mode. Okay. Once someone hits 200 on a scale of consciousness, their brain changes and their level of awareness changes into these upper levels of enlightenment. So he actually brought in Buddhism. He was super Christian, and so his studies of this, where you're at right now, we could say you're way up in probably the 500s.
Oh my God.
Who knows? I'm throwing it out there, but I think at some point I hit 600 I don't think I'm always there. I mean, having kids is hard to be up in that place of like Zen, because you have to, I don't know really, but that's my assumption. Once I had kids, that was when I stopped levitating. Right? Because then I'm like, well, that would make sense in terms of survival mode. Once a mother has children, all of a sudden it changes how you perceive your safety. And now you're with someone else, and now you're concerned about them. And so my safety is relative to their development. So it changes how I'm responding as an individual human in my own levels of, if I were isolated, I will never, if by choice, go down there again. Some of it is not choice because we're animals. I can't get rid of the animal brain at this point, other than to be very aware of my sense of ability. We could say as animals, what throws people down into survival mode is when you do not feel that you're capable. So there's a personal sense of, I'm not capable of this. So if you're in front of a bear and they're running after you and you're like, holy shit, I'm not capable, you're probably going to get eaten.
Wow, yeah.
You'll be paralyzed. I can't. You go into those animal reactions, which is to either fight or to flee and hide.
Yeah.
So if you look at Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, the lower levels there's fear. So we can break down the lower scales of consciousness from fear down, where it's fear, I think guilt. I don't have it in front of me.
I'm trying to bring it up.
Basically, below fear is hiding. It's when you have apathy, shame, apathy, guilt, and I know which one. Your grief, guilt. I think I can't remember, but grief is in there. Where people feel they have lost. They are not capable. It's hopeless. Right? In that case, when life is occurring around you, you go into hiding. You go into shame. Life is, it's always bad. Life is bad. You don't really have the energy either to do something about it, because it just feels hopeless. I do believe on the binge eating side of things, you're living kind of on that lower end of the scale, because it feels hopeless, especially when you get into an area where it's like you have over 150 pounds to lose or 100 pounds to lose, where it can feel when you take dieting into account, right? And the radical amount of survival impulsivity it causes, right? Again, you're threatening the first hierarchy of need. The most fundamental psychological priority is being threatened. And imagine you have to do that as long as it's going to take to lose 100 pounds. Can you see why people go into apathy?
Yeah.
Hopelessness,
absolutely.
Total hopelessness. Because that is inhumane. It's wrong. Like, why? And not only that, but you're supposed to do it when food is everywhere and all around you.
Yeah.
See how that even makes it worse. And so it becomes like hopeless. And then you turn it onto yourself as if you are a piece of shit, because I should be able to handle this. Because the diet industry, they just make it seem like this is the next best thing. It's going to save your life. It's going to, we could look at the protocol and we can look at all sorts of different things that are going to just make it so great and easy. And it's going to be like, and it's not.
Yeah, no.
So it just reinforces when it's not the idea that I am not capable of this. Again, so you're going into a state of survival that is more in hiding, trying to hide and run away. So as you move up the scale of consciousness, if you look at Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, it goes up into fear. When you face your fear, and this is what he says, you lose your depression, because below fear is not facing it. You don't think you can handle it. And so you live in depression.
Yeah, that's where I've come from.
Now, this is not me talking. I am referencing Dr. David R. Hawkins' work. He was a world-renowned psychologist who had the most successful practice in the world for decades. And he studied consciousness and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, so when you don't face your fear, you go into depression and apathy because you can't handle it. I can't handle it, right? So what we did the other day probably pushed you out of that. You faced fear and you handled it just by facing it. It's like it pulls, what he would say is it pulls to you what it takes to face it by facing it. By just the willingness to do it, you pull from consciousness what it takes to do it. So you don't go into it thinking, I can handle this. Clearly, if you felt that way, you'd be above fear. You're not, right? Above fear is more of the arrogance and the pride and the energy of, fixing things, which is good on one hand. So you go up into those upper levels of survival mode, just still lower levels of consciousness, but you're getting into where you feel I'm capable. So you become a slave to all the work it's going to take for you to survive. So you live as a slave when you're in the lower levels, but the upper end of it. You're not in apathy anymore, but you're fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. Right? Yeah. And so when you got thinner, you could go, I could see I had more energy. I did feel capable, but it was very much pride oriented. So the top of the lower levels of survival mode relative to Dr. Simeon's scale is pride, which is inflated. It's like taking your survival and saying, I survive. It's like the animals that get bigger. They are, like dogs that have their hair that stripe up and they billow up. It's like they're trying to promote and threaten others. So it's like the human inflated self is a survival mode. And that would be your typical narcissist that we, right? Yeah. And so that's the inflating yourself and fighting, which is war, domination. That's what that is. It's a human brain in pretty extreme inflammation, but having just enough confidence to want to hurt others. Yeah. Right? Yep. On the other side of that is a very, very steep slope down into shame. Right? Yeah. Yeah, I can remember feeling like, if I lost a couple pounds and somebody would be, oh, you look so great, and just feeling so puffed up and prideful about it. And then as soon as I look at the scale and I've gone up, then there I am. Down at the bottom. At the bottom of the pit. It's hopeless. Wow. And that's where binging occurs. I remember I've ruined it. I've sucked. I failed. And you can go all the way up and down in that. And it's so hard because you become trapped by being a slave to your pride. You have the energy to do all this work, trying to run away from what is really full of shame. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a tortured place to exist. So when you surrender your pride, right? When you surrender and you have this humility and you go into grace, it kind of removes all of that. Yeah. And so in your case, we really surrendered to the body image, which I think was the gatekeeper for you to get out of this insanity. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's opened up so many different things already, and even just over this weekend since our last session. I mean, I before I felt like I couldn't really have like a connection with God. And now I just feel open, like it's free flowing between us now. Yeah, well, and you should feel that with everything. Yeah. Everything here is an expression of that. Yeah. Everything. Yeah, I can see everything clearly and absorb the beauty around me. And it's always been there. Yeah. It's not like all of a sudden you earned it and it's coming to you. No, it's always been there. You just were super distracted. Yep. Looking through looking through tunnel vision, thinking that's all that's existed was tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Not realizing that no, tunnel vision is not supposed to be there. You have the ability to see huge range. Not visually, I'm talking like spiritually, emotionally.
Right.
It's massive. Like you said, it's like it's opening up. I'm like, yep, and it doesn't stop. It's infinity.
That's awesome.
It just makes you aware, too, of relativity. It's like, oh, well, relative to each position or each tunnel vision someone's looking at, what they're seeing is true relative to that position and that tunnel vision.
Yes.
They have no idea that they have tunnel vision, though. So I'm saying, oh, well, this exists. And they're like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You know.
Yeah.
And so you just have to go, okay. They'll figure it out. You know, it's kind of like body image. So let's talk about that. In order for you to be happy and to feel good about yourself, you need to be thinner.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
Tunnel vision.
Yep.
Do you see how that basically you become trapped and enslaved?
Yeah.
That's all you see. That's all because your entire survival is depending on it.
Yep.
Then you are now going into threatening your food because the food becomes the threat, right? Food becomes the block to that happiness, right? So you go into dieting, restricting. I need to control it. We need to organize it. I have to make plans, and I have to, you start to put all of that energy into dieting, but in the end, what that really does is it just makes your brain think about food all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
So for me, and that's why I think they call it an eating disorder, because that's the obvious side effect that you see with food.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's not really an eating disorder.
No.
Do you see that clearly now?
Yes, absolutely.
That is just your human nature working. Because you're kind of extreme in your desire to be thinner. Yeah. Which is the only reason why you'd threaten your food. So food is obviously threatened. When I see someone that's like, yes, I'm a binge eater or I'm addicted to food, the first thing I think of is, oh, well, they are, in their minds, they believe they should be dieting or depriving in a radical way.
Yeah.
It's a radical sense of I should deprive. I should deprive. Deprivation is coming. I shouldn't be eating, so they feel constant danger with food, which is why they are over consuming. It's very animalistic.
Yeah.
And they don't see that. They see it as there's something wrong with me, because why can't I stop eating even though I'm physically getting bigger and bigger and bigger and it's affecting my life? Why can't I stop eating? Well, it's because you can't stop feeling ashamed about your weight, which puts you in a position to have to chronically deprive. And the more you're overeating and the bigger you get, the bigger the deprivation is.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. I describe it. I'm trying to write it, and I'm using the example of a sinking ship, that you're on a sinking ship. And in order for you to just stay buoyant, you have to get pails of water and get rid of the water, right?
Yeah.
But that's all you do all day long. The idea that you've been sold, really right? But the idea you were told is that, well, once you're buoyant, once you're balanced, once you're, on water and you're not sinking anymore, is it'll move forward. And then you can explore the world, right?
Yeah.
But every day you fill up a basket, pour it out. That's all you do every day. And then you wake up and it's sinking and you just do it again the next day. And you never really get to that point where it's not sinking anymore.
Wow.
To where so in terms of a binge eater, they get to a place where they just need a break. They're like, I'm going to let it sink for a little. Because I know right before it sinks, I'm going to work it all out. I'm going to get it out as fast as I can because I can handle that. So I'm not going to worry about it. and the water start flooding in, and you're just like, I just need a break. And the boat gets bigger, right? So this is an expandable boat, which means it's holding more water. And can you imagine what it would feel like to know every time you just take a break that it gets worse? The amount of work to get all that water out of the ship gets to such a degree that you know you are an indentured servant to it.
Yeah.
And
wow. Oh my gosh, that's such a good illustration.
Isn't it? So the anorexic is doing the same thing, but they take pride in not having any water in their boat. So they become obsessed about cleaning the boat. So they're not going anywhere either. And they're also moving pails of water out of the boat, but they're doing it to an extreme.
Yeah.
To where if they let any water in the boat, that means that they are shitty people.
Oh my gosh.
So they're going above and beyond and getting nowhere to prove they don't have water in their boat. So they don't get anywhere because they're obsessed with making sure there's no water in their boat. That they forget that aren't they supposed to be driving the boat?
Wow.
No, because their water might come in the boat. Right?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So you see how it's the same problem on total different ends of the spectrum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just not moving and
not going anywhere.
Surviving, floating in the middle of the ocean somewhere, sinking. Or
yep.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just sitting in the same spot.
Yeah.
And all you do is you become trapped. You're a slave to the boat, in the water, in the bale. You know.
Wow.
Anyhow, so when you look at it from that perspective, it's just sad. Because it's like, why can't you just get out of the boat? Just jump off the goddamn boat.
Yep.
And just flutter around in the water. At least you're going somewhere, but you have no boat to have to focus on.
Yeah. Just enjoy the feeling of the water on my skin and live. Yeah.
And the waves. It's like, oh my God, I love this feeling. And to know you could always go back to that boat and start getting that water out.
Ugh. Nope.
But, you see where the diet industry sells you the boat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how I felt when I joined that group. Like, oh God, here we go. I can't. I just had to bail.
I know, and there's going to be boats that come up to you in the ocean and go, look, we have a boat, it's way better.
Oh, all day. And I thought about, cutting off all the social media, and I'm like, no, I want to look at it. I want to see it so that I can turn it away, and just...
And recognize it.
And
yeah, because you need to. Well, you get that now. It's like, why would you enable? You don't want to be in denial.
No.
The key is that you are willing to say, no, thank you. You guys go for it, though. I kind of enjoy the small. I'm going around, and I'm living in this ocean, and I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Because I'm free. I'm free.
Yeah.
I have freedom. I am not chained to a sinking boat.
Yep.
That was supposed to be better than your body floating on the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyways, and then you realize I'm personally buoyant. I don't need a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the amazing thing is over this weekend I've really, just let my body be in charge, and it feels amazing. Like feels oh my God, I can't even explain it. Like all my muscles just felt tight before, and even my veins just felt like they were about to burst, and everything is just kind of relaxing. My head is clear.
And you haven't lost any weight.
I don't know if I have or not.
Well, you haven't lost enough for it to be. this is what the diet industry teaches you. When you lose the weight, you'll feel better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's absolutely not true.
That's what I meant by, and you haven't lost any weight.
I never felt like this.
Yeah. It's like, this is an awesome experience to really witness the power of the mind and how it impacts the physicality of the body. It's amazing, isn't it? Like how your perceptions and beliefs and how all of that really does affect your body and your organs.
Yeah.
You know, and your brain, and how when you surrender all of it, when you surrender the beliefs, right? Because the belief was that you held on to is that thinner people are better people, happier people. Yep. When your body is thinner, life is better.
Yeah.
Right? Free. You will be free.
Yep. That's exactly what I thought.
Mm-hmm. So by accepting your body as it is and removing thinnerness from life forever, what happened?
It just set me free from having to control. I can sit down with a full plate of whatever food I want and not have to finish it. Like before, I felt like I had to shove every bit of it in my face, and now it just kind of loses its luster after a few bites, and I'm okay, you know?
Yeah, because it's permanent.
Yeah.
If it was not permanent, if we were like, we're just going to do this for a week, and then the next week we're going to go back on a diet, you'd be like, it wouldn't be that way.
Oh, no, I would be shoving it all in.
Yeah, it's the permanence that is really quite also important. And I think that is a common block for people, too, is they go through these stages and they become, like, aware of how, oh, I feel relaxed. They experience this. But in the back of their mind, they're thinking, I'll do a round of the protocol, or maybe I can lose some weight. So they really don't grasp the whole freedom. They're getting a sense that the freedom does exist, which is amazing in itself, right? Because before you reached out to work with me, you probably had no idea this existed.
No, well, I saw your videos and I heard some people talking about it, and I'm like, you know, is this going to be real? And I would try to do it on my own, you know, before I talk to you, but I needed you to guide me through it.
Honestly, all you needed was to take it serious.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's why I charged you so much money.
Yeah.
Right? Remember that conversation? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's why I do it. It really, and even then, some people pay and they don't do it. It's like, I can't
even imagine.
Because they're so close. You know it. You're like, oh my God, it would have been so easy for you to just not do what I've been telling you.
Yeah.
So easy to say, Robin doesn't know what she's talking about because she's not overweight. How does she know? You know?
Yeah.
So easy to create a position to where you won't do it. I cannot accept this body. I cannot accept that I'll never be with another person again. That people might not love me. They cannot go into that space, which I believe actually is what is solving the origination of the survival mechanism, is that third hierarchy of need. It's not feeling that you are lovable.
Yeah.
Right?
That was huge.
Well, that is, in my assumption with everybody I've worked with, to include you and me and my own story, is that it didn't originate with the threat of food.
Yeah.
Even with clients I've worked with who came from third world countries as refugees and they've come here and they've whatever, that's not the origination. I grew up in a very, very poor family and I did go hungry. That was not my problem. That wasn't the source of the problem. Source of the problem is feeling that I am rejectable as a human being, which keeps you in fight or flight.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you feel inadequate. I do not feel lovable. So we attach and we cling on to these social structures, right?
Yeah.
I can cling on to religion. I can cling on to body image, right? Look at these structures and can you see how people can use them for this reason?
Yes, Absolutely.
Right? And so they grasp onto these social structures. And I know for me, it's like when I sucked at religious doctrine and the radicalization of the rules, I felt it made it worse for me because I felt like I was unworthy of God. I'm unworthy of Jesus Christ doesn't save people like me. Yeah. Isn't that so messed up?
Yes.
I know. Anyways, so for me, I transferred it to, well, then I can feel better about my body because I have I'm not hopeless there. So I took my hopelessness in religion, my super low level of shame and inadequacy, and in my need and want to survive, it grasped onto something I felt like I could fight for, which is body image. I could fight for that.
Yeah.
So I went into pride. I went up into, I'm thinner, I'm hot, I'm muscular, I have this athletic body, I'm capable. Not only do I look this way, but I actually could do 20 pull-ups and I could do so much physical proof that I'm worth something. Wow. Right? So I latched onto the body's ability. Not just the body's attractiveness to people who are into the athletic build, but the actual ability of the body I latched onto. Yeah. With survival, right? So add survival to exercise and you can achieve anything, right? Wow. Anybody in survival mode is going to become Olympic status, Yep. And so for me, that's where I became trapped. It trapped me. And can you see why? Because now I'm trying to feel that I am a lovable human being, but I'm doing it through extreme avoidance of food, right? And food is now my enemy. Whereas when I was in religion, I wasn't doing that. Alcohol was my enemy. Sex was my enemy. There were other things I had to repress. Right?
Right. Wow.
So when food gets repressed, now you're dealing with major problems.
Yeah, because that's something you need to survive.
It's actual reality survival shit. Yeah.
Wow.
Eating disorders have the highest morbidity rate of all mental health problems.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, well, no, duh. You're trapping someone. You're using someone's lovability as a carrot to get them to starve.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, do you see that clearly? Like, what the hell? That's like saying you can only sleep for 3 hours to be in our freaking clique. So you end up with a bunch of people who are sleep deprived, and then when they fall asleep, we're going to call them disordered. You have narcolepsy. When you really don't. You're just telling people to not sleep, to be in a cool crowd.
This is like horrific.
Yeah, everybody's being told you're addicted to food, thinking that, no, they are actually in shame, obsessed about their weight, and they're normal human beings. The problem is we don't live in a third world country, so it doesn't make sense with reality in our environment. So they're living as if they're in a third world environment and reacting as if they're in a third world environment, with food, but they're not. So that's where there's like, why are these people doing all of this despite the destruction that's happening physically and the fact that there is no famine going on? Has anybody thought to ask about the dieting and the amount of shame they have with food and the belief that they shouldn't be eating, that they should, that might be underneath it all?
I know. It's so crazy.
Yeah, why are we talking about the surface shit? No, it's not that.
No.
Look at your own situation, okay? Would you describe your relationship with food as radical before?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Have you ever been diagnosed with binge eating disorder?
Yes.
So you've been diagnosed?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then the doctor at the same time told me that I probably needed it. to, to keep myself alive so I wouldn't kill myself. Like it was a crutch.
So were you diagnosed with like borderline personality?
I never really got that far. I probably went to a few sessions with the person. Each time I would, get to this extreme point, and then I would go to a few sessions, and then I would be like, okay, I'm fine. I'll just take Prozac and I quit.
Yeah, Prozac doesn't do anything.
No.
For this circumstance. I'm not talking about other people who have other issues that it does great things for. But for us, this I believe is a syndrome.
Yeah.
It won't do anything. Because it won't get rid of your desire to be thinner. If it can get rid of the thin supremacy and your desire to be thinner, it would work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
I know. That was another thing I remember when I was going to see therapists, and I just knew, that they wanted to put me on antidepressants too. And I just remember going, how is that going to get rid of my obsession with being thin?
Yeah.
How is it going to get rid of I have to write charts of calories and quantities, and how is it going to do that? How's it going to get rid of what I'm miserable doing? It's the slavery, right?
Right.
It'd be like, let's look at the ship situation. It's like we're consciously aware that I am miserable being a slave to getting pails of water. That's all I do every day. How are they going to get me to stop if I'm not willing to sink?
Wow.
They have to get rid of I have to be okay sinking to stop.
So then they really don't understand
they don't understand
the situation, and they're just trying to help the symptoms.
Correct. And then they're just going to say, well, you have a disease. You're genetically predisposed. It's like, well.
That's hopeless.
Right? That is.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, okay, so and I was told that you will live with this for the rest of your life. And I remember hearing that and just going to a very dark place.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta be kidding me. This is the way I'm going to live forever. And I just knew at that point it wasn't worth living for.
Exactly.
And I knew they were wrong. I didn't know this at the time. I had no context. And this is the other thing that, now that I'm on this side of it and I'm working with people to try to help them get out, I have more context. I have practice with explaining it, and I just believe that when people who are in that terrible state don't know why they're there, and they don't know what's going on. It's extremely confusing, right?
Yeah.
You're paranoid. You're looking through tunnel vision. You're you're in that super enraged fight or flight survival mode. And you can't breathe. You can't see straight. It's just, and so it's hard for people who are in it to explain it. And so that's why I don't think that the therapy of it is it's been useless. It's been very, very ineffective in general when people get eating disorder help.
All it did was just give me more victim mentality, I could say.
Yeah.
Because then it just, okay, well, I'm this way because that happened with this parent, or this happened with that person.
And they did this to me. They did this to me, or now you're diseased and it's genetic, so now your genetics are fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
It makes me want to just, share it with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have to remember, you can't, people have to reach out for this.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, post, I wanted to just go on Facebook and post all my sessions and all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't do that because people are not going to understand until they need it, until they come get it.
You watched my sessions. Did my sessions help you? Well, then share your sessions. Who cares? Someone who will connect with them.
Yeah.
Will get something out of it. And people that don't will be like, what? I can't believe that she's really needs to lose weight. I can't believe she's talking to someone who is encouraging her to just not care about it anymore. That is just so bad.
That could, yeah, you know what? That could open me up to some good therapy too, because if I get some, posts or messages about, what I should be doing, I could brush that back.
Yeah, and just be like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for caring about me. I feel so much better. I'm doing so great right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a personal thing. I remember too, when I came out of it, I didn't have words to explain it.
Yeah.
I was 20 and I just didn't have any context around it. Plus, this happened to me in a weird out of body experience. Like, I didn't have someone aiding me through it.
Yeah.
It just came to me in like a sequence of thoughts and arrangements of visions, and I don't even know what the hell, but,
yeah, I get that.
I came out of it and I didn't even know recovery had happened until I was walking on campus, and I remember feeling so much love, like intense, radiating love for everybody, like people I walked by, strangers, total strangers. It was like something that wasn't forced in any way. It just occurred.
Yeah.
So normally, you read a self-help book and you try to implement what they're saying. That's force.
Right.
This is so not that.
Yeah.
So many people ask me, oh, did you read this book and that book? I'm like, no. I don't.
Yeah, I have stacks and stacks of books that I.
Well, from this vantage point, can you see why my answer is no?
Yeah.
Why do that? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but what's it going to do? Nothing?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah. Plus, I'm not seeking anything anymore. It's all here where I'm at. It's in my own space of existence.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I'm doing the best I can with what I'm aware of, and I'm good with it. So the problem a lot of people have is they're not good with it. They're not good with what they have and what they're existing in. They're not good with it. So they go outside of reality to try to find a way to feel good or to change whatever it is to feel better about it. And it's an illusion of change. You're not changing anything. You're in the boat, getting all the water out and going nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like I just am where I'm at, and I learn as I go. And of course, like, like studying Maslow's hierarchy of needs has given me context. It's really, really improved the ability to communicate what this is and how to describe it. Right?
Yeah.
So that it has context rather than I just feel fucking crazy. You're like, oh, let's call that survival mode. Instead of crazy train, survival mode.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So I will say though, that once you've surrendered this, you've done it with the body. Sometimes this isn't enough for people. They still have like life beliefs that they have to surrender. So, this was a big one. It was a huge one for me. It basically unloaded everything. So some people get here, but then they still feel like a victim to their parents. They still feel a victim to what my husband said to me 20 years ago. And they're stuck in survival around it because they can't get beyond their own inability to handle what happened as a kid.
Right.
And so you may have to do more work around getting yourself a sense of, I can handle it. I can handle that. Couldn't as a kid. No kid really understands what's going on, and neither do the parents that I had. You go through that grace that you give yourself this grace, and all of a sudden the people that you shamed and felt victim to, you start to feel grace for them in their situations.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So what happens to you in your history is really not about you. It had a lot to do with them and how terrible. Like, imagine your parents in this state of mind raising children.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make sense to you now? It's like, oh, well, no wonder they would do that, because that's important for them, their sense of safety in their reality of unsafety.
Right.
That was what I realized with religion for my parents, that it was very much a part of their sense of lovability came from this religious supremacy.
Right.
So not only am I a superior human because I'm in this religion, but God thinks I'm superior too. And
wow, yeah.
So they're projecting the survival into what they think the concept of God is.
Yeah.
God is going to save me. I'm pretty sure God doesn't do that.
Yeah.
You're already saved, you just don't recognize it.
Exactly.
Like, you're in hell by choice.
Exactly, yeah. Like, I'm in here with the key, going, nobody's gonna open the door for me.
Exactly. No one's gonna open the door. And then you realize you've got the key, but the door's already wide open. So it was it's like, oh, this was open the whole time. Well, yeah, but you thought that you had to be thin to walk through that door.
Yeah.
You thought you had to be as perfect. You had to follow the scriptures to get through that door.
Yep.
You thought you had to die and be saved in the afterlife to get through the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I know. There's so much shit out there that's like, oh, it's coming from people's sort of desire to survive. They come out of survival. It's like, oh, the whole entire concept. Like we were saying in the beginning, like the New Testament. Read that over.
Yeah.
Because it's about to take on a whole new meaning. Looking at Buddhism, looking at the study of Buddhism on a whole nother level of meaning now.
Yeah.
In fact, all religions, if you look at them all, they're all saying the same things. The same exact thing.
Yeah. That's what I'm realizing too, because when I'm reading the Bible, it is about your mind, about how you think and believe what you believe, So it's so huge where the mind can take us, or where we can be enslaved in it,
Yeah, and twist it into something it's not, and then worship something that it's not supposed to be worshipped. There's distorting it into something that separates you from others.
Yeah.
Putting the Bible above others' Bible.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so anti-Christ when you think of it that way.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, all right, well, I'm excited you reached out this morning.